Hello, middle schoolers. Today I want to talk to you about shading or adding value to the sample Zentangles that you made yesterday. What you're going to need is just a good old pencil. You can use a 2H, or if you have access to it, I prefer to use a 2B. B stands for black, so it means that it's a softer lead. It's just what I prefer to use, but a 2H pencil works just fine. So the reason for adding value to your Zentangles is to give them a little bit more depth. Right now they're interesting to look at, but they appear a little bit flat. So by adding in just a little bit of shading, you can really make these look more interesting and more full of depth. I'm also going to use a blending stump, or this is called a tortillon. If you have access to this, you can use it. Otherwise, your finger will work just fine too. All right, so shading crescent moon, all of these Zentangles, there's many different ways to shade them. I'm just going to show you one variation, but there's lots of ways to do it. So what I was kind of thinking is making the smaller area right in the center kind of look like it's falling backward. So I was going to shade that in a little bit darker, and then as you come out towards the edges of the tangle, my shading would get less and less. And I want to keep the edges white. I don't like to shade the whole entire thing. I like to have a variety of value. And this is where I would pick up my blending stump. The purpose of a blending stump, if you've never used one before, it just spreads out your graphite and it gets rid of any of your sketching marks. It turns it into like a really nice smoky gray. Okay, so by adding in just a little bit of shading, you can see it has a little bit more depth. With Hullabo, you can do a variety of things. If I wanted to, I could go along the edges like this. And since I picked the right side, I'm going to continue with that throughout the entire drawing. And you can see by just adding in that little bit of shading on the edge, on the right edge of these lines, it makes them look like they're more three-dimensional. Okay, so that's Hullabo. With Printemps, what I usually like to do is add in just a little bit of shading where one of the little spirals kind of overlaps another one to make it look like it has more depth. And again, I'd come in here with my blending stump and just kind of fade that out a little bit. If you get enough graphite on the end of your blending stump, you can even just, if I do it right over here, you can see there's graphite on there, and I don't even really need to use the pencil. All right. Now with floors, usually what I like to do when I'm shading this, I just pick like one corner and I add in just a tiny amount of value in that corner, almost like an L. And then I'll come back in with my blending stump. When you're adding and shading, notice I'm using a very, very light pressure. If I was to use a heavy pressure and kind of scribble it in, I would not be able to blend that out when I use my blending stump. And you can see, just makes it look a little bit more interesting, and that it has a little bit more depth and it's not such a flat line design. Okay, next one I'm going to do is jetties. Now I feel that since these are like an orb, I kind of put like a small arch of value on the underside of them, like they're resting on each other, and there's a shadow to make them look more three-dimensional. Now with jetties too, I could choose to come back in here with my ultrafine black Sharpie, and I could fill these negative space areas in between the orbs in black. That's your choice if you'd like to do that or not. And then come back in with my blending stump. And just kind of smooth it out a little bit. Okay, so that one is jetties. Next one I'm going to shade is the bales. This one, there's a couple different things. You could do something like floors, where maybe I came in here and I just did a little bit in every corner. Sometimes what I like to do is I like to shade the whole inside shape, almost like that diamond. I like to shade that in solid gray, a light gray. I don't want to like make it black. I also could choose to shade like the centers where everything intersects, kind of in a circular motion. Okay, so there's a couple different ways that I could do this. Come back in and use my blending stump, kind of fade that out a little bit. If you have a different way of shading this, that's great too. These are just two options. Okay, so two options for shading bales. With striping, this is kind of the cool part of this one, where you can really start to make these stripes look like three-dimensional. So if you think of them almost like they're tubes, and maybe pick one side of it to make darker, or maybe this one would be like a cone. Then as I go across it, my pressure gets lighter and lighter. And this could be the highlight area right here where the light is hitting it. I would do the same over here. And then maybe, let's see, this one here I could have be dark. I don't agree with this one right here that I did. Take that off of there. And so by adding just a little bit of shading in there, you can really make these look three-dimensional. And remember to keep some of the areas white. You don't want to shade it all in gray. Okay, so that's striping. Zeppel is very similar to Floors, the one above it. You could just go along and pick, you know, maybe like you want to just do the bottom of each one of those. You could also choose, maybe you want to come in here and make that negative space gray. That was my dog Stella. She just got up and decided to lay back down. She's my old girl. Okay, so a couple different things that I could do. I could even do, you know, both of these things. I could just use the graphite that's on my blending stump too. Okay, so that one is Zeppel. And that is it for shading the Zentangles that I've showed you.